Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. A lot of negotiating going on to get 22 EU nations to agree to a deal with Turkey, which most notably would mean the return of all migrants and refugees across the Aegean Sea in a one-for-one swap with asylum seekers that are already on Turkish soil. In part one of our conversation, we were talking about whether or not it was feasible. We're talking about it in the company of Elmar Brok, who chairs the European Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee and hails from Angela Merkel's CDU party. Welcome back as well to French conservative Les Républicains member of Parliament, Jacques Millard, Paris-based British journalist Alex Taylor, and from Athens, Yanis Bournou of the Foreign Affairs Committee of Greece's ruling Syriza party. Welcome back to all of you. Yanis, just before the break, we heard Elmar Brok saying, yes, the Turks have not held up their end of the bargain at times, but neither have the Greeks when it comes to setting up those hotspots that have been slow and coming. Yanis Bournou, what do you say to that?
This is not accurate. The Greek government, despite the fact that we have very limited resources, has been trying even before receiving European funds to finish up all the scheduled construction of hotspots, which are now finished. I think I would like to comment what has been mentioned earlier and say that I think it's rather hypocritical to use humanitarian words in theory, but not be able to apply a humanitarian policy as the European Union in practice. What I mean by that, there is a provision of Article 7 of the European Union Treaty in order to sanction the member states that unilaterally don't implement the EU agreements. And this has not been deployed by the European Union leadership because there's lack of political willingness on behalf of the political majority of the European Union, and I'm sorry to say, but this includes the European Popular Party that my two co-speakers belong to reinforce the application of this agreement and block the unilateral moves that have been made in the last weeks by the Visegrad country, by Austria and other European Union states. The hypocrisy is also the fact that it is also hypocritical to say that today we are trying to resolve things because actually the European Union is not trying enough. In September 2015, there was an agreement for the safe resettlement of 160,000 refugees from Greece and Italy. And until today, there are only 937 persons relocate from our country and from Italy. If the European Union leadership wishes to apply a genuinely humanitarian European policy, then it should bring back to the agreed measures all the national governments which are conservative, with the exception of the Slovakian Social Democratic government, which was heavily defeated by the right wing in the recent elections, to bring them back to the things that have been agreed.
To call them to order. Elmar Brok, your reaction?
I wonder that everyone in Europe and Turkey are responsible. Only Greece has met the commitment. That is, after what I just heard, it becomes a little bit ridiculous. The mistake we have all of us to do it in that way. Do it in that way. Can I finish my sentence, please?
No, because it's absurd to characterize what I said ridiculous. My country has over 20% of unemployment, and it's just exceeding 6 years of recession because of neoliberal policy. We are doing our best, and we are teaching how to apply a humanitarian policy in comparison to your government. Unfortunately, I have to admit this, and this is the reality.
All right, Elmar Brok.
We know that since many, many years in the Euro question, Greece has not met its commitment. That is another story. And also in this question, supporting the control of the borders, Greece has not accepted European aid to do that for some time because with the argument of sovereignty. Only with the inclusion now of NATO, it seems that it works and we come forward with that. Greece had promised in October in the Balkan summit to build 50,000 places in camps. Now they start. It's financed mostly by the United Nations and by the European Union. We again now, after 400 million last year, this year 300 million are given to Greece for these purposes. So not to do nothing has happened. But we have made all mistakes. And I think Germany has made mistakes that, as many other European countries, we decreased the money for the camps, for the food in the camps in Turkey and other places. And
was it a mistake, as Jacques Miao was suggesting, that we Angela Merkel's decision to open the borders?
Germany has taken 1 million migrants in the course of the last 6 months. That should be taken into account, that it's around 80% of all the migrants who came to the European Union in the last 6 months.
Was it a mistake by Angela Merkel to, after the world was moved by those images of that Kurdish boy lying dead on a beach in Turkey, to open the border? Was that a mistake, Elmar Brok?
I think Germany has not opened the borders. Germany has taken in the 7,000 people in September who were lying on Hungarian streets in the mud. And this was a humanitarian reason to do so. But we have border controls since December, again, under the Schengen rules, in order to control the people which come. But we believe we have to have less figures. That is one of the reasons is that we have this Turkey deal. We have to talk to over Northern Africa too. This will become much more problematic even in the course of this year. The Libya question, to keep people outside the European Union. We have to strengthen the border guards, what we have to do together, and we have to relocate people, a fair distribution of burden within the European Union. And this is the way Mrs. Merkel is working for, to combine order within the European Union, not to overburden the countries in the European Union, and at the same time keep our international obligation under the Geneva Convention and the international humanitarian law.
Once again, we're talking about a deal with Turkey, and last week, while the EU and Turkey were negotiating, authorities were cracking down inside Turkey on the opposition media. Since we've had Sunday's Ankara bombing, which left 37 dead, the response has been more airstrikes against the Kurdish separatist PKK and pressure to ban the Kurdish-rooted opposition party HDP, even though it has condemned the bombing.
Excuse me, but I no longer see the members of a party which is operating as a branch of a terrorist organization as legitimate political actors.
Alex Taylor, should we be cutting a deal at this particular... Timing is important. Should we be cutting a deal at this particular time with Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
Well, we have to cut a deal with Turkey if we want to solve the problem of migration, because vast amounts of the people who are leaving the war zone go through Turkey. I think that in the long term, I mean, we've been negotiating with Turkey now for the last 30 years, on and off, about their possible membership of the European Union. There have been hot periods and cold periods. I think that the European Union will be a good thing for Turkey if Turkey can, at some stage, become compatible with the values. I mean, I've heard this all before. I've been a European journalist for 30 years. I can remember very clearly when people said it's absolutely not possible that Spain, with its dictatorship, would ever be able to become a member of the European Union. It's not possible that Portugal, you couldn't possibly have all the countries which have just emerged from communism. I think that if we engage with Turkey, if we tell Turkey, if you want to become part of this massive market, which they do, then you have to change a whole load of things about freedom of the press, about your values, how you treat your citizens. I think that in the long term, it's a good thing that Turkey is associated.
Let's roll back the clock then. 2007, Nicolas Sarkozy is running for president. It's the debate between rounds 1 and 2, and he insists Turkey should never become an EU member.
I'd rather tell the Turks that they'll be associated with Europe and they'll have a common market with Europe, but they will not join the European Union for the simple reason that Turkey is in Asia Minor. I refuse to be the one to explain to French schoolchildren that the borders of Europe stop at Syria and Iraq.
Looking back at that statement, what's your reaction there, Alex Taylor?
Well, I mean, I've been watching this for 30 years, as I say, with Turkey in and out. I think the only way to have that Europe can have a positive influence on the development of Turkey as a society is to say, if you want to become a member of our club, then you have to obey our rules. I think it would be the interest of our continent. I don't think our continent can be big enough. The world is developing into huge blocks at the moment. Asia, America. I think that a bigger European Union with strong economic policies and also strong institutions, which mean that we can defend the outside borders. I mean, I totally agree with Mr. Mayor, what you said about defending our borders, but the solution is to invest in Frontex, to give it the means to control who comes into the outer borders of the European Union. What's your alternative? I'm always fascinated because we've been watching this exchange between Greece and Berlin. The alternative to all this is what? That we go back to what it was like 50 years ago, where each country determined its own... No, hold on. Well, what's the solution? I remember, like you do, what it was like when you had to show your passport when you go between France and Belgium.
What does it mean, show your passport? It doesn't prevent you to go through.
No, it doesn't prevent you to go through, but it prevents you from having a common policy in Europe's interests.
Freedom of traveling and absence of control.
But not common policies.
I'm sorry, we made a big mistake with this Schengen. I always said that in Schengen you have 90% of good things. That means the exchange of information. When states put in the Schengen system information, because they don't do that today.
Well, that's the problem. They should.
Secondly, it doesn't mean you can prevent any control.
But
that's a big mistake.
Jacques Millard say that statements like that of candidate Sarkozy back in 2007 pushed Turkey away from European values.
First of all, as I said to few Turkish ambassadors in Paris, why do you want to join Europe? It doesn't exist anymore in 10 years. Because we are facing today a European organization which is collapsing. On every field, collapsing, absolutely.
For the last 50 years.
No. Well, it will come. It will come. Don't worry, because of course, to get rid of communism, it was 70 years, but now it's come to the end. Look what's happening. The Brexit. The British do
not sure.
Good question.
So
sure.
Not sure,
but not so sure. But in fact, they put good question on the table.
I agree.
Well, then we have to solve that.
But what's your solution?
The solution, I can explain that to you. It will take a few hours, but then I have a new project for Europe, which is cooperation and not integrism. Because you dream of a federal state, it will never be.
I don't dream. I have nightmares.
It will never be the case.
No, it's not true. I have nightmares.
Hold on for a second, please. Hold on. Keep quiet. I will tell you one thing. In fact, Turkey belongs to European system. I agree. As well as Russia. Are you going to extend your European organization to Russia?
I hope very much if Russia changes.
Okay. Yeah. Then we need a new system.
Mr. Mayor,
a system in which, of course, yes, you are going to speak and to start again. But you know, this journalist, my friend in front of me, wants to explain to us that this Europe, federal Europe we are facing is a good thing. I say no.
Elmar Brok.
Okay.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I do not see the Turkish membership. But Turkey is a candidate country. That was not the decision of my party. We were against it in 2004, but now we have the membership negotiations. I do not see that Turkey will become member of the European Union. Turkey will never fulfill the conditions of free media, the independent judicial system, freedom of religion. And at the moment, Turkey is further away from membership than it was before. And at the same time, I do not believe that Turkey will sign a membership agreement. But we have to keep Turkey closer in our camp.
That's it.
In that part of the world, Turkey is still one of the best. And if you look on the map, to have Turkey in our ranks is of the utmost importance. And we have to find a new way in these negotiations, which have to be conducted.
But Elmar Brok, a lot of people are watching us in Turkey, watch our show from Turkey. How would they feel? You're telling them they should never be inside of the EU, but we should keep on with the negotiating process.
I think it's written in the mandate for the negotiations of 2004. The goal of the negotiation is the full membership, or if they arise in the time of the negotiation or the ratification process problems the highest possible bindings. That could be something like a Norwegian solution. Not member of the European Union, but closer, member of the internal market. Here's a common interest there, and develop it in such a direction. Then it's also not discriminating, and we keep these NATO countries within our camp. And on the same time, when we talk about Schengen, if I heard it rightly, we have to see one special point, that is to the French and to the Germans, for example. In order to control terrorism, is it important to share information? And Europol, who has to fight terrorism and organized crime, gets not information from national sources. Neither the German nor the French security services give their full information to Europol. That is our internal mistake.
This is not Europol.
We should talk to our governments to fulfill properly this job, that we can save Schengen, but at the same time find properly terror in order to exchange the full information about that.
What about the PNR that Germany refused to ratify in the European Parliament, my dear colleague? I'm sorry to say,
that it's wrong. I have ratified it. I voted for it.
Yeah, you maybe.
Most of the German members of Parliament have ratified PNR.
Yeah, long time they refuse it.
The majority of Germans have done that.
Well, a few days ago.
I just don't see the alternative
Nein,
to this.
this a few weeks ago, monsieur.
I just don't see the alternative to what you're suggesting. You seriously think we should stop Schengen and that we should go back to each country, like it used to be in my youth, where each country had its own policy and had were constantly in conflict with each other?
Make an effort to fancy another world that you have been fancying for 20 years and which is not working properly?
Well,
can you fancy one time that you made mistakes? You are in a pure utopia, and then we have to change it, because this Europe is collapsing in front of your eyes, and you say this is a drama.
Collapsing. It's not collapsing.
When you want to have Europe collapsing, then you are destroying the instrument to solve the problems.
Absolutely.
You cannot solve one problem. In migration, in terror, climate change, without the European Union.
Migration, we are at the start. We are at the start, and we are not at the end of migration. And this is not with Schengen or any border that we will stop that. We have to work on the third world countries. We have to stabilize those countries in Africa, and we have to make an end in Syria, where we have been playing God, because we fancy that this regime was tumbling and it's still there. And we have been leading the wrong policy in Syria.
Let me bring in on this Yanis Bournos. The European Union has been, as we see, fighting last week, fighting this week over this proposed deal with Turkey. When you hear the argument over the effectiveness of the EU, how do the Greeks feel about it? You're on the front line of the refugee and migrant crisis. Is the EU part of the problem or part of the solution?
I do agree that we need a new system, but the problem is, that, according to our approach, that the current system of European integration is dissolving or collapsing practically, but also in the consciousness of European citizens, because of the institutionalization of financial authoritarianism and the violation of popular sovereignty by neoliberalism. So we need to change this system in order to keep alive the idea of European integration. You need to imagine that Greek citizens who have been contributing to the welcoming and the accommodation of thousands of refugees right now in the Greek islands in the Aegean, but also on the mainland and near the borderline with the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, are very disappointed to see that there is no real European shared responsibility solution to the refugee crisis, which comes to add up to a lack of genuine democratic European policy concerning all the major issues. The European Union has not protagonized, as it should have done, in the drawing of a peace roadmap for the Syrian conflict in order to fight against the main source of the refugee crisis.
And is the deal being worked out? Is the deal being worked out between the EU and Turkey better for the EU or better for Turkey?
This will depend on the final outcome of the talks. This will depend on the final outcome of talks. We believe that a sustainable agreement should definitely include the direct and safe and agreed resettlement of refugees of war from Greece and Turkey to Europe, the return of the migrants that are not included in the Geneva Convention back to Turkey, but in any case, with the rejection of any idea of unilateral actions by European Union states. And on the other hand, allow me to comment something on this discussion you had on Turkey and its European integration process. This is a personal estimation. I think that the current Turkish government is not so much interested in an immediate application of its European membership, because it knows that in order to open the remaining closed chapters that have to do with its European Union membership, it has to recognize the Republic of Cyprus, which means open its ports and airports to Cypriot ships and airplanes. And at the same time, in the internal political scene in Turkey, it has to fully respect the democratic provisions of the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of political action.
All right, let me just bring in Alex Taylor very briefly, because we're almost out of time here. Do you agree that basically all this talk about Turkey's EU candidacy, it's just a bargaining chip on both sides at this point?
Of course it's a bargaining chip, but I mean, the European Union, if you look at its history over the last 60 years, has solved much bigger problems than the problem of Cyprus. I know it's a very real problem for the people who are there. We're facing the biggest humanitarian crisis. Europe is trying its best, step by step, to find a solution. If we give Europe and its institutions more power to control its borders and to come to a common solution, I think Europe will be able to solve this crisis as it solved so many crises over the recent decades.
Yeah. All right, I see Jacques Millard shaking his head, but we're out of time, unfortunately, so I want to say thank you.
I agree with our German friend as well. We have to deal with Turkey because this is part of the solution.
I want to thank you, Jacques Millard. I want to thank Elmar Brock for being with us from Berlin, Yanis Bornus in Athens, Alex Taylor. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
So, as you can see, a passionate discussion and a lot of suspense as to whether or not this deal between the EU and Turkey will fly.
Yes, and certainly it seems if you look at what the cartoonists are coming up with, they've already really made their decisions, certainly in terms of the part that President Erdogan is playing in all this. This particular cartoon has him painted as a mercenary, using his unique position really to get what he wants from the European Union, in this particular case cash, but also the possibility of joining the EU. He is standing there as Syria burns, keeping a tight lock on the dam that's holding back those refugees from entering the rest of Europe. Another cartoon on this topic has Jean-Claude Juncker kissing the feet of President Erdogan. And if you notice on the right-hand side there, the press cameraman is actually chained. Of course, a reference to the fact that President Erdogan is currently issuing really a war on independent journalism in Turkey right now. Now, if we take a look...
Alex Taylor, cartoons that show Erdogan as a sultan, are they below the belt or are they fair game?
No, of course they're fair game, and they will be when Turkey adopts the values of the European Union, which it will one day, and become part of the thing. I think that's what we're pushing them that way, but we're not going to help them by excluding them from becoming members of the European Union.
Well, Amnesty International, interestingly, seem to have a very different viewpoint on this one. What they're urging is for the EU to say no to a bad deal with Turkey. They say, let's not confuse desperation for legality. The very principle of international protection for those fleeing war and persecution is at stake. Does Europe uphold the right to asylum or give in to horse trading with a country that has an inadequate record of respecting it? Lots of other publications really trying to put the human face on what is happening with regards to the refugee crisis. Time magazine has a very interesting piece. They had journalists in the Idomeni camp who actually went with a group of hundreds who tried to escape it when the Macedonian border was closed.
The border between Macedonia and Greece.
Exactly, and when that border was closed, there was an attempt by hundreds to leave it, and he describes one of the most desperate and reckless episodes of Europe's refugee crisis, one that provides a warning of what's to come as migrants seek new ways to break through the Balkan blockade. And The Guardian, too, as well, has this series of photographs by Mohammed Muhaisin documenting Syrian children who are living in a Jordanian refugee camp in the city of Mafraq. And really the simplicity of the captions that go with these photographs really show how the most basic, ordinary human rights are being denied these small children. Khalid Rakan, 10, I just want to go back home to Syria. This next one, Omar Suleiman, 5, I want to grow up, because for them, that's a reality that they might never get to be. They might never reach adulthood. And this final one here, I just found so shocking, because this child is just 3 years old, but looks so much older. And you realise when you look at a photograph like that, just how much these children have experienced and seen that they should never have had to witness.
And this is the week that Syria marks 5 years since the start of its uprising. I want to thank you, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.